Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Do you ever feel like your business, or maybe even just, your own efforts, are stuck in this brutal, exhausting wrestling match?
Hmm.
Where everyone's fighting for the same customers, profits feel squeezed tighter than toothpaste, and everything just feels sort of
Yeah,
commoditized.
it sounds familiar.
Like there's no room to breathe, let alone grow.
It's the reality for so many industries today, isn't it? You're constantly battling rivals head to head in markets that seem, well, increasingly crowded, and like you said, where products and services start to look interchangeable.
Exactly. It feels like a constant battle just to hold your ground. But what if there was a different path? What if you didn't have to compete directly at all?
Ah, okay.
What if you could actually create entirely new market space where, you set the rules?
That's a pretty bold promise. And it's really at the heart of the material we're diving into today. It challenges the whole idea that strategy is just about competition.
Right. And the genre we're exploring, it's business strategy, specifically some truly groundbreaking thinking. If you're someone who loves uncovering powerful ideas that can genuinely change how you see the world, business, or otherwise, please take a moment right now to like and subscribe.
Yeah, it really helps the show.
It's the best way to help us bring more of these deep dives to you.
So our focus for this deep dive, pulling from the source material you shared, is the book Blue Ocean Strategy: How to Create Uncontested Market Space and Make the Competition Irrelevant by W. Chan Kim and Renée Mauborgne.
It's such a refreshing perspective, isn't it? The link to grab your own copy is in the description, by the way.
Good point.
Our mission today is basically to unpack the core ideas, the practical tools, and some really vivid examples straight from the material you've given us to show just how powerful this concept of making competition irrelevant can actually be.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The authors start by painting a picture of the strategic landscape using these two powerful metaphors: red oceans and blue oceans.
Right, red oceans. Think of that as the world we know. All the industries that exist right now, the established market space.
Uh-huh. The boundaries are defined, everyone knows the rules, and companies are basically battling each other fiercely to capture a bigger slice of the existing pie, the existing demand.
And because everyone's doing this, focusing on beating the competition, the space gets incredibly crowded. Products become, well, commodities, right?
Exactly. They start looking so similar that customers often only see the price differences, and that inevitably drives intense price wars and shrinks profit margins for everyone.
It's a market drenched in competition, hence the red ocean, blood in the water kind of thing.
Makes painful sense.
Eh,
Yeah. So blue oceans are the complete opposite. They aren't about competing in existing space. They're about creating new space.
Okay, uncontested space.
Precisely. These are the uncontested market spaces, the unknown territories, if you like. In a blue ocean, competition isn't really the main factor because the rules of the game are being set by the creator
Ah, so the focus shifts.
completely. It shifts from simply dividing up existing demand to actually generating new demand. And that leads to opportunities for highly profitable growth.
Yeah.
The whole aim here is to find a way out of that bloody red ocean and into the clear, open blue.
Okay, so how do you even do that? What's the fundamental concept that lets you make competition irrelevant? They call it value innovation, right?
That's the cornerstone. Yep. And it's crucial to understand it's not just about value, and it's not just about innovation and isolation. It's the synthesis of both.
Synthesis, okay.
Value innovation happens when you align innovation with utility for the buyer, a strategic price point, and your cost position, all three together.
Okay, but doesn't that sound a bit like just, standard innovation? How is this different? Is the making competition irrelevant the really key part?
That's precisely the distinction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Standard innovation might improve a product or process,
Mm.
but it's usually within the existing red ocean rules. You're still playing the same game, maybe just a bit better. Value innovation fundamentally changes the game. It creates such a leap in value for buyers and for the company simultaneously that it makes competitors' existing strategies less relevant. You're essentially operating in a space they haven't even defined.
Got it. And this is how they talk about breaking that traditional value cost trade-off, isn't it? That old idea that you either have to be high value, which usually means high cost.
Right,
So,
will be low cost, which often means less value.
yeah.
Exactly. Value innovation rejects that compromise. It's about finding ways to simultaneously increase value for the buyer and decrease costs for the company.
Ow. By getting rid of stuff.
Pretty much. By eliminating and reducing factors the industry currently competes on, but which might not add that much real value anymore.
What's fascinating here is how relevant this feels right now. They argue that the need for blue oceans is actually, increasing because of the current global economic climate.
Absolutely. We're seeing supply exceed demand in many areas.
Hmm.
Globalization is tearing down geographical barriers that used to protect niche markets.
Uh-huh.
Commoditization is accelerating, and all of this is just fueling more price wars and squeezing margins even further.
Yeah, when everything looks the same, price becomes the only battleground in the red ocean. So finding ways to differentiate by creating genuinely new value is becoming less of an option and more of like a survival imperative.
And this raises an important question.
Yeah.
If we want to understand how these blue oceans are created, where should we look? At specific companies, at entire industries.
Right? What's the unit of analysis?
Well, the author's research, based on analyzing historical strategic moves across loads of industries, led them to a different conclusion.
They found that consistently excellent or visionary companies don't necessarily stay that way forever. Things change.
Exactly. And industries themselves are constantly evolving, shaped by the players within them. So neither the company nor the industry alone is the most useful unit of analysis for finding the roots of profitable growth through blue oceans.
So what is the key then?
Their studies showed that the key lies in the strategic move, those specific actions and decisions that result in a significant leap in value and open up new market space. Companies might rise and fall, but it's these individual moves that create the blue oceans.
Okay, that makes sense. Focus on the action, not just the actor. So let's unpack the practical side. How do you actually formulate a blue ocean strategy? The material you shared highlights some powerful analytical tools. One of the core ones is the strategy canvas.
Ah, yes, the strategy canvas. It's a great diagnostic tool, but also an action framework. It helps you visually map out the current state of play in an industry.
Okay, so it's like a graph.
Sort of. The horizontal axis lists the key factors that the industry competes on and invests in, things like price, features, service, whatever is relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And the vertical axis shows the level of offering buyers receive across those factors, usually from low to high.
So you can plot the value curve for different competitors, or maybe the industry average, showing where everyone's currently focusing their energy and investment,
Yeah,
like a snapshot.
exactly. And the authors point out that an effective blue ocean strategy canvas, or its value curve, should have three complementary qualities that really stand out: focus, divergence, and a compelling tagline.
Focus, meaning you're not trying to be everything to everyone. You're concentrating investment on just a few key factors.
Precisely. And divergence means your value curve looks different. It doesn't just mimic competitors, it stands apart. It has a unique shape.
And the tagline, that's like the elevator pitch.
Kind of.
Mhm.
The clear, simple message that encapsulates the essence of your blue ocean strategy and really resonates with potential buyers. If your canvas is just a squiggly line trying to match competitors on everything, lacking that focus and divergence,
And you can't summarize it easily.
then you're likely stuck in a muddled, probably high-cost red ocean strategy.
Okay. They also mention a tool for looking at a company's current portfolio, the Pioneer Migrator Settler Map.
Yes, the PMS map. It's a way to figure out where you stand right now. They suggest looking at your company's offerings through this lens.
So settlers are.
Think of settlers as your Me Too products. They're just fighting for scraps in existing red oceans, basically value imitating.
Okay. Migrators.
Migrators offer maybe better value, perhaps differentiating a bit, but they're still fundamentally playing in the existing market space. Value improvement, but not creation.
And pioneers. Those must be the blue ocean creators.
Exactly. They're the ones opening entirely new ground, creating new value curves. So a company with mostly settlers has pretty limited growth prospects.
Right. They're just treading water.
Migrators are okay, but still vulnerable. Pioneers are where the exciting future growth lies. It helps you see if your current strategy is setting you up for future blue oceans or just reinforcing your position in existing red ones.
Got it. Now, how do you actually design that new divergent value curve? That's where the four actions framework comes in, right?
Yes, this is a really powerful way to challenge the underlying assumptions and the sort of conventional logic of an industry. It poses four key questions about the factors the industry currently competes on.
Okay, what are they?
Eliminate, reduce, raise, and create.
Eliminate. Like, which factors that the industry has long taken for granted, maybe things everyone thinks are competitive necessities, should just be completely eliminated because they no longer add real value.
Spot on. Then reduce. Which factors should be reduced well below the industry standard? Perhaps they're over-engineered or companies are over-investing just because competitors are.
Okay. Raise.
Which factors should be raised well above the industry standard? These are often things where buyers are currently forced to compromise or where there's significant untapped demand.
And finally, create.
Create. Which factors should be created that the industry has never offered before? These are entirely new sources of value that can attract new buyers, maybe even non-customers of the industry today.
This is where the examples from the material you provided really bring it home. Let's talk about yellowtail wine. The U.S. wine industry was like a super crowded red ocean.
Oh, absolutely. Tons of wineries, really confusing choices for the average person, intense competition everywhere.
So Casella Wines, the Australian company behind Yellowtail, they didn't try to compete on those traditional wine metrics, did they?
Not at all. They used these 4 actions to create something entirely different. They eliminated and reduced things like the focus on tannins, oak complexity, the need for aging.
All that wine snob stuff.
Kind of. Also, the elaborate wine distinctions, the overwhelming choice of varietals. They even downplayed vineyard origin, which is huge in traditional wine marketing.
Okay, so they simplified. What did they raise?
They raised the price slightly above the really cheap budget wines, positioning it as accessible, but suggesting better quality than the absolute bottom shelf.
And
They created an easy drinking, fruity, slightly sweet taste profile that appealed to a much wider audience. Plus, incredible ease of selection, initially just 2 types, a Chardonnay and a Shiraz, and that fun, approachable branding with the kangaroo.
Right. Instantly recognizable.
The result? They created a social drink. It was accessible not just to existing wine drinkers, but also to people who usually drank beer or cocktails. They attracted non-customers of the industry.
Wow.
And they became incredibly successful without massive advertising spend, simply because they offered something genuinely different and appealing. Their value curve looked nothing like the established players.
It's such a clear illustration of not competing head-to-head. Another great example from your material is Cirque du Soleil.
Absolutely. A classic. They looked at the struggling traditional circus industry, which was really a red ocean.
Fading fast.
Yeah. Using the 4 actions, they eliminated expensive elements like star performers and animal shows and things like aisle concession sales.
Get rid of the costly, controversial stuff.
Right. They even reduced the focus on things like sort of slapstick fun aimed purely at kids and the pure thrill and danger element of animal acts.
And what did they raise and create instead?
Well, they raised ticket prices dramatically compared to traditional circuses. They positioned themselves as premium entertainment, and they created things like a unified theme or story for each show, multiple productions running at the same time, a much more refined viewing environment, and integrated artistic music and dance drawing elements from theater.
So less sawdust, more sophistication.
Pretty much. They didn't try to make a better circus. They created a completely new form of entertainment that appealed to adult theatergoers, corporate clients, people who wouldn't traditionally go to a circus at all. Another blue ocean created by totally reconstructing industry elements.
Okay, so we know how to build a new value curve, but how do you systematically find these blue ocean opportunities in the first place? This leads us to the 6 paths framework, right? Which is all about systematically reconstructing market boundaries.
Exactly. This framework encourages you to look beyond the conventional lines that typically define your industry or market. Path 1 is look across alternative industries.
Alternatives, meaning industries that look different on the surface but actually serve the same fundamental purpose or customer need.
Precisely. Like NetJets, they looked at 2 alternatives: commercial airlines and buying your own private jet.
Very different options.
Right. Commercial travel is lower cost per seat, but involves hassles, airports, delays, fixed schedules. Private jets offer amazing speed and convenience, but come with massive fixed costs and high variable costs.
So NetJets didn't just compete with airlines or jet manufacturers.
No.
Yeah.
By creating fractional jet ownership, they combined the speed and convenience of private jets with a much lower variable cost and, crucially, the avoidance of those huge fixed costs. They appealed to busy corporate travelers who wouldn't buy a whole jet but needed more than commercial could offer.
Creating a market between the 2 alternatives.
Exactly. Or think about iMode in Japan. They looked across cell phones and the PC internet.
Okay, phone versus computer.
Cell phones offered mobile convenience and voice calls. The PC internet offered data, information, services, but it was expensive back then, complex, and tethered to a desk. NTT Docomo combined mobile convenience with simple, always-on data services, email, basic info, games at an accessible price point. They essentially created the mobile data market for the mass consumer, targeting people who found the PC internet too complicated or just inaccessible.
Okay, path 2. Look across strategic groups within industries. What are strategic groups?
Within any industry, you usually find groups of companies pursuing similar strategies, often defined by dimensions like price and performance. Think luxury versus budget car makers, or full service versus discount brokers.
Gotcha. Different tiers within the same industry.
Yeah. The insight here is to understand why customers trade up or down between these groups, what makes them choose one over the other. Curves, the women's fitness company, is a good example. They looked across home exercise alternatives and traditional big box health clubs.
Two different strategic groups for fitness.
Right. Women might trade up to health clubs for motivation and better facilities, but they often traded down or avoided them due to cost, time commitment, or feeling intimidated or self-conscious.
Makes sense.
So curves eliminated things like bulky machines, food courts, spas, pools, even locker rooms and mirrors. They reduced the workout time to just 30 minutes. And they created a women-only, non-intimidating, super quick, low-cost circuit training experience.
So they deliberately targeted the reasons women abandon both home exercise and traditional health clubs. Clever.
Yeah, exactly. Path 3. Look across the chain of buyers. Who does your industry typically focus on? Is it the person who actually pays, the purchaser, the person who uses the product, the user, or maybe someone who influences the decision, an influencer?
Industries usually focus on one main group, right?
Often, yes. Shifting that focus can unlock completely new value. Bloomberg is a classic example here. The financial data industry traditionally sold terminals to IT managers, the purchasers.
Okay, the people managing the budget.
But Bloomberg shifted focus to the traders and analysts, the users. By understanding what the users truly needed, real-time data, powerful analytics tools right there, even personal concierge-type services because they had high incomes but very little free time.
Focusing on the end user's needs.
Bloomberg made their terminal absolutely indispensable to the people who actually use the data day in, day out. They created such high demand from users that the IT managers basically had to buy it, almost regardless of the cost.
They empowered the user to drive the purchasing decision. Interesting. Any other quick examples?
Yeah, the material mentions Canon focusing on the user for their desktop copiers, making them easy for anyone in an office to use instead of just the corporate purchasing department. Or Novo Nordisk targeting diabetics directly with user-friendly insulin delivery systems like pens, not just focusing on selling bulk insulin to hospitals or doctors.
Right, making it easier for the actual patient.
Okay.
Okay, path 4. Look across complementary product and service offerings.
This is about thinking about the total solution customers need to accomplish a task. What happens before, during, and after your product or service is actually used? What other things do they need?
Okay, thinking broader than just your product.
Exactly. Consider any buy buses. They sold buses to municipalities. They looked beyond just the initial purchase price of the bus.
Which is probably what most competitors focused on.
Right, and they looked at the total life cycle cost for the city. This included big pain points like maintenance, fuel consumption, and dealing with corrosion, especially in harsh climates.
Didn't that add up over years?
Hugely. So at ABI started using fiberglass for the bus bodies. This eliminated corrosion issues and significantly reduced maintenance needs and even fuel consumption over the bus's lifetime, even though their initial purchase price was higher.
The dramatically lower total cost of ownership created a blue ocean of value for the municipalities.
Precisely. They also found ways to reduce manufacturing costs and increase interior space by using composite materials, which allowed for smaller engines and fewer axles.
Another example mentioned was Cemex in Mexico, the cement company.
Yeah, they didn't just see cement as a functional product, bags of gray powder. They looked at the complementary service or goal, building a home addition, which for many people was seen as a really frustrating, long, complicated process.
Right, not just buying cement, but achieving the dream of a bigger home.
Exactly. So Cemex reframed cement as enabling the gift of dreams, and they added complementary services like financing options and construction know-how, essentially bundling the product with the total solution the buyer truly wanted, the finished home edition, delivered more easily.
Path 5. Look across functional or emotional appeal to buyers.
This one's about how industries often compete intensely on either the functional utility or the emotional appeal of their offerings. The idea here is to challenge that orientation.
So if your industry is very functional, add emotion. And if it's emotional, add function.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
Or shoot the emphasis. The classic example is Swatch. The watch industry, especially at the lower end, was primarily functional, focused on telling time accurately, durability.
Right, a tool.
Swatch transformed the budget watch into an emotional fashion accessory. It became about self-expression, collecting, fun. They completely changed how people bought and wore watches, especially inexpensive ones.
And the other way around.
The body shop is a good example. The cosmetics industry was heavily driven by emotional appeal promises of beauty, glamour, hope in a jar. The body shop added a strong, functional, and ethical appeal, focusing on natural ingredients, simple packaging, and actively challenging traditional beauty standards.
Right, appealing to practicality and values. And CMEX, as we mentioned, added emotional appeal, the dream home, to a purely functional product like cement.
Exactly. Path 6, the last one. Look across time. This is about identifying key trends that are already unfolding, trends with a clear trajectory, and figuring out how your business can shape the future and capitalize on them, rather than just reacting incrementally.
So looking ahead at decisive trends, like iTunes.
Perfect example. Apple didn't just react passively to the trend of digital music and illegal file sharing. They saw the clear trajectory, but they also saw the major pain points for consumers.
Like the illegality, the dodgy quality sometimes, the difficulty finding music, having to buy a whole CD for just one song you like.
All of that. They capitalized on the digital trend by offering a better solution. A legal, super easy-to-use platform with a la carte downloads at an accessible impulse buy price 99 cents. They created a massive blue ocean by addressing the compromises consumers were making with both physical CDs and illegal downloading.
Okay, so those 6 paths give you ways to find potential blue ocean ideas. But once you've used these frameworks and generated an idea, how do you know if it's actually viable, if it'll work in the real world?
It's crucial. You don't want to invest heavily in an idea that's doomed from the start. They provide a sequence filter called getting the strategic sequence right.
A sequence, meaning you have to pass the tests in order.
Yes, exactly. It tests the idea against 4 key criteria in a specific order: buyer utility, price, cost, and adoption. If you fail on any of these early on, the idea is unlikely to succeed commercially, and you should probably rethink or abandon it.
Okay, first hurdle, buyer utility. Does your idea unlock truly exceptional utility for the mass of buyers? Is there a really compelling reason for people to switch from what they're doing now and choose your offering?
Right. Is it genuinely useful in a new way? They suggest using tools like the buyer experience cycle, mapping the customer's journey from purchase, delivery, use, supplements, maintenance, all the way to disposal and the utility levers.
Levers like simplicity, convenience, risk reduction, fun and image, environmental friendliness.
To systematically identify and eliminate the biggest blocks to utility that customers currently face.
The material mentions the Model T example here.
Yeah, Henry Ford looked at the early car buyer experience and saw huge blocks. Cars were unreliable, so maintenance was a big risk. Roads were terrible, making them inconvenient. He addressed these directly by making the Model T simple, incredibly robust, easy to fix, and building a dealer network for service. That unlocked exceptional utility for the mass market, not just the wealthy hobbyists.
Okay, so first, utility must be there. Next, strategic pricing.
Yes. Is your price set at a level that's accessible to the mass of target buyers? And this is important. It means looking beyond your direct industry competitors. You need to understand the price corridor of the mass. Meaning, what are people currently paying for alternatives that serve the same function or objective, even if they look completely different? Products or services in other industries, or even totally different forms.
So for Yellowtail, they didn't just look at other wines, but maybe beer and cocktails too.
Exactly. That helps you find a price point that attracts the largest possible group of target buyers. This accessibility is really crucial, especially because many blue ocean ideas aren't easily protected by patents long-term. A mass accessible price encourages widespread adoption and powerful word of mouth.
Which can be a strong defense against imitators jumping in later.
Precisely. Then, after setting the strategic price, comes target costing.
Can you actually make money at that price?
Right. Can you profitably deliver the offering at the strategic price you've set? This usually isn't about just cutting costs incrementally. It often requires significant cost innovations or streamlining processes, like how Swatch radically simplified watch design and manufacturing.
Or partnering.
Or partnering strategically, yeah. Like SAP did for its enterprise software, or NTT Docomo did for iMode content. If hitting the cost target is really difficult, you might even need pricing innovation itself.
Like Blockbuster, changing the game from selling expensive tapes to renting them cheaply.
Exactly. Changing the revenue model entirely can sometimes bridge the gap if the cost target seems unreachable through operational changes alone.
Okay, utility, price, cost. What's the final hurdle in the sequence?
Adoption. Have you thought about and planned for the hurdles to adoption? And this isn't just about customers accepting the new offering. It crucially includes your own employees, your business partners, maybe even the general public or regulators.
People resisting the change internally.
Yes. Or external partners being unwilling or unable to adapt. You need to anticipate fears, resistance, potential roadblocks, and address them proactively. This requires really open discussion and clear communication about the strategy and its implications.
They contrast Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch here, don't they?
Yeah. Morgan Stanley openly discussed the disruptive threat of the internet with its brokers, got their input, and gained their buy-in for their online strategy. Merrill Lynch initially was less communicative, which apparently led to significant internal resistance and slowed down their response.
So you need to bring everyone along. The book provides a tool, the Blue Ocean Idea Index, or BOI Index.
Yes, it's basically a checklist or scorecard to help you systematically test your idea against these 4 criteria. Utility, price, cost, adoption. Successful blue oceans like iMode tend to score highly across all 4.
And ideas that look promising but fail these checks during development.
Like Philips' CDI multimedia player or Motorola's Iridium satellite phone system often end up as costly commercial failures, despite the technological innovation. The business model wasn't right.
Okay, so even with a brilliant strategy and a commercially viable idea tested through that sequence, execution can still easily derail everything. The authors identify 4 common organizational hurdles.
Yep, the execution challenge is huge. First is the cognitive hurdle.
Meaning getting people, especially managers, to even recognize the need for a major strategic shift and accept a new reality, breaking free from the comfortable status quo.
Exactly. We've always done it this way. Second, the resource hurdle. The perception, or sometimes the reality, of having limited resources, money, people, time to actually implement the new strategy.
We can't afford to do this right now.
Right. Third, the motivational hurdle. How do you get the mass of employees, the frontline troops, to be genuinely enthusiastic and actively work towards the new strategy, rather than just complying passively or worse, resisting?
Getting buy-in from everyone.
And fourth, the political hurdle. Dealing with internal politics, powerful individuals or groups with vested interests who might actively resist the change because it threatens their power, status, or resources.
Okay, cognitive, resource, motivational, political. How do you overcome these?
They propose something called tipping point leadership. The core idea is that you don't need massive resources or universal buy-in from day one. Instead, you focus disproportionate influence on the extremes.
Extremes. Like what?
Like key influential people, specific acts or initiatives that have high visibility and impact, and critical activities that can create momentum. The goal is to rapidly tip the organization toward the new strategy with relatively low cost and effort by focusing your energy intelligently.
Okay, how does that work for each hurdle? For the cognitive hurdle.
Seeing is believing. You need to get managers out of their nice offices and expose them directly to the harsh operational reality. Make the problem undeniable.
Like the example of William Bratton when he became chief of the NYC Transit Police.
Exactly. He made his senior staff ride the chaotic, crime-ridden subway system day and night. Not just look at crime statistics, but experience the electric sewer firsthand. That forced them to confront the true extent of the problem and the need for radical change.
Or getting leaders to meet directly with unhappy customers instead of just reading filtered reports.
Yes, like the Boston Police District, for example, where understanding residents' real fears about minor quality-of-life crimes, not just major felonies, led to a strategic shift that actually made people feel safer. That visceral experience reveals the true pain points and galvanizes action.
Okay, how do you jump the resource hurdle with limited resources?
You need to concentrate your existing resources on the hot spots, those areas or activities that have the highest performance impact if you improve them. And just as importantly, identify the cold spots.
Areas that consume resources but have low impact.
And actively redeploy resources away from them towards the hot spots. You can also engage in horse trading, swapping resources you have, but don't really need for ones you desperately do need from other departments or units.
Bratton's bus's example fits here, right?
Perfectly. He converted old city buses into mobile processing centers parked right outside subway stations. This wasn't a huge new resource investment, but it drastically cut the time officers spent processing minor arrests from maybe 16 hours back at the station down to about 1 hour on the bus.
Freeing them up.
Freeing them up to actually patrol the subways, which was the high-impact hotspot they needed to focus on. Smart reallocation.
Makes sense. What about the motivational hurdle, getting the masses on board?
Here, you need to engage the mass of employees. One key is using fair process, which we need to discuss more, making people feel heard and respected. Another is identifying the kingpins,
Kingpins.
the natural leaders, the most influential people within the organization at various levels, whose buy-in and enthusiasm can sway many others. Focus your efforts on winning them over first. You also need atomization.
Breaking it down.
Yes, breaking down the big, perhaps overwhelming strategic challenge into concrete, manageable tasks that people feel they can actually accomplish. Celebrate small wins along the way.
Like how the NYPD under Bratton identified key precinct chiefs as kingpins and broke the huge goal of reducing crime into specific, measurable tasks, like cracking down on fare evasion and cleaning up graffiti atomization. Success in those visible areas motivated everyone else.
Exactly. Finally, jumping the political hurdle, dealing with internal resistance.
The toughest one sometimes.
Often. You need to proactively manage the politics. Identify your angels, those who strongly support the change, and leverage their influence. You also need to anticipate and neutralize or silence the devils.
Those with vested interests who will actively try to undermine the change.
Right. And having a politically savvy insider, someone who understands the internal landscape and can navigate the corridors of power, what they call a conciliere, on your core team, can be absolutely invaluable here.
Okay, and this brings us to a concept that you mentioned ties formulation and execution together, building execution into strategy through fair process.
This is so critical. Because strategy isn't just crafted by senior management in a vacuum. It has to be executed by everyone down the line. And if the process used to arrive at and communicate that strategy isn't perceived as fair by the people who have to carry it out.
It breeds mistrust.
Exactly. Mistrust, resentment, lack of commitment, which leads to resistance or even outright sabotage. The book's example of the coolant supplier, Lubber, is stark. Their sales force deliberately undermined a new expert system because they felt excluded from the decision, threatened by it, and hadn't been properly consulted or informed. The process felt unfair.
So what are the principles of fair process?
They emphasize three core principles, the three E's. First, engagement.
Involving people.
Yes, involving people in the strategic decisions that will affect them. Genuinely asking for their input, allowing them to challenge ideas, understanding their perspective.
Second.
Explanation. Even if you can't incorporate everyone's input into the final decision, you must clearly explain why decisions were made the way they were. Provide the rationale, the thinking behind the new strategy or the changes. Don't just announce it.
Makes sense. People want to understand the why. And third?
Expectation clarity. Once the strategy is set, you need to clearly state what is expected of people under the new rules of the game. Define the new responsibilities, performance standards, consequences. No ambiguity.
The material you shared highlights a contrast between two manufacturing plants, Chester and High Park, implementing similar changes.
Right. At Chester, management brought in consultants secretly, didn't really explain the why behind the changes clearly, and basically fueled employee fears of job losses. The process felt imposed and unfair.
And at High Park?
At High Park, management engaged employees early, explained the competitive reasons for the changes thoroughly, listened to concerns, and set very clear expectations about new roles and processes.
And the outcome was very different.
Dramatically different. Chester employees felt unfairly treated, resisted the changes, even actively sabotaged new equipment, causing huge delays and costs. High Park employees, even those who weren't necessarily thrilled with every single aspect of the change, trusted the process. They felt respected.
So they committed.
They committed to the new strategy and voluntarily cooperated to make it work, leading to rapid and successful execution. Fair process isn't just a nice-to-have soft skill. The authors argue it builds intellectual and emotional recognition, fostering trust and commitment, intangible capital that is absolutely crucial for effective execution.
Okay, so you found your blue ocean, formulated a strategy, filtered it for viability, and build execution through fair process. What about sustainability? Blue oceans won't remain uncontested forever, surely. Imitators will come.
You're absolutely right. Success inevitably attracts imitators. That's the nature of markets. However, blue oceans created through genuine value innovation often have significant built-in barriers to imitation that can give you a valuable period of uncontested time.
What kind of barriers are we talking about?
Several kinds. The imitator's existing value curve might need such a radical shift to match yours that it just doesn't make sense for their established business model or brand image. Think brand conflict.
Right, like a luxury brand trying to copy a budget offering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a natural monopoly effect where the market created really can only support one dominant player efficiently. Patents, if applicable, offer legal protection for a time.
Okay, what else?
You might gain significant cost advantages from the scale and experience you build rapidly in the new market, making it hard for followers to match your price-value proposition. Network externalities can also be powerful, where the value of your offering increases as more people use it, creating a virtuous cycle.
Like social networks or online marketplaces.
And sometimes, the sheer scale of organizational change required for a large incumbent competitor to pivot and truly replicate your blue ocean strategy is just too high a hurdle for them to overcome quickly or effectively.
Plus, if you've delivered that significant leap in value at an accessible price,
You build strong brand buzz and customer loyalty very quickly, making it much harder for rivals to just come in and steal your customers. Imitating a whole system of activities designed for value innovation is much, much tougher than just copying a single product feature.
okay, so there are defenses, but imitation will likely happen eventually. When do you need to think about value innovating again? When do you launch the next blue ocean?
The signal is when you start seeing competitors' value curves beginning to converge on yours again. When the competition starts to look more like you, threatening to turn your blue ocean increasingly red.
So you monitor the strategy canvas.
Constantly. The goal isn't necessarily to stay in one blue ocean forever. It's to swim as far ahead as possible in your current one, building scale advantages, brand loyalty, and profitability before you need to launch your next blue ocean strategic move to stay ahead.
It's about being a moving target, then, and understanding that long-term profitable growth comes not necessarily from perpetual excellence in one space, but maybe from the ability to repeatedly create these new market spaces.
That seems to be the core message. And importantly, their research shows that these blue oceans aren't just created by nimble startups out of nowhere. Most actually come from within existing industries, often by established companies that find ways to challenge their own boundaries and assumptions.
That wraps up our deep dive into the really powerful ideas from Blue Ocean Strategy. It's such a compelling argument for shifting our focus, isn't it? From just battling harder in crowded spaces to actively finding and creating entirely new ones.
Definitely. By using frameworks like the strategy canvas and the 4 actions to formulate the strategy, applying the 6 paths to discover new opportunities, testing viability rigorously with the strategic sequence, and then ensuring smooth execution with tipping point leadership and fair process.
Yeah.
The material really shows that making competition irrelevant isn't just some abstract ideal. It can be a systematic process.
We really hope you found this exploration as fascinating as we did. Thank you so much for bringing these sources to us and for joining us on this deep dive.
We truly appreciate you being here and listening in.
Now, we'd love to hear from you. What was your biggest aha moment, or maybe your favorite example from today's deep dive? Share it in the comments below. We genuinely love hearing what resonated with you.
Yeah, definitely let us know.
And please, if you found value in this discussion, like the video and maybe share it with someone else who you think might find these ideas insightful.
And just as a final provocative thought for you to consider, perpetual excellence in any single company is incredibly rare, historically speaking. But maybe the ability to repeatedly create blue oceans by focusing on these kinds of transformative strategic moves is the real key to sustained, long-term profitable growth.
So take a moment to think. In your own professional life or even personal endeavors, are your efforts mainly focused on fighting harder in a crowded red ocean? Or are you actively looking for and maybe pursuing opportunities to create a clear blue one?
Something to mull over.
Definitely something to mull over. Until next time.